Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Smart Business webinar series. Today we have a guest panelist, Jennifer Wheatley from HR Affiliates. So Jennifer is a human resource executive with over 25 years of human resource experience in multiple industries. Her passion is providing HR solution for her firm's clients by helping them build HR infrastructure through strategic planning, employment law compliance, and best practices on human capital. She especially enjoys working with entrepreneurs and family-owned businesses. She holds a master's in human resource management and a BS in business administration. She is a senior certified professional as well as a certified senior professional in HR. She serves on Kentucky Society for Human Resource Management State Council as the Director of Membership. Jennifer also is an adjunct professor at the University of Louisville, teaching Human Resource Management in the College of Business. She is also a member of the University of Louisville Family Business Center, where she is also a facilitator for the HR Roundtable. Thank you, Jennifer, for hosting with us today.
Absolutely, thank you. Ready for me to get started?
I'm ready.
All right. Well, Jen, thanks again for allowing me the opportunity to be here today and to talk about this, my favorite subject. Hopefully it'll become everyone's favorite subject, but I really want to just really talk through some of the basic HR principles that every business owner, executive needs to know when either starting or growing your business. And as Ginger mentioned in my bio, I've worked in corporate America for a long time, but my passion really is the small business owner. It is the lifeblood of our country, and I love seeing entrepreneurs who have great ideas really see their businesses taking that concept, that idea they had, and turning it into a thriving business. But one of the things that I have kind of a common theme that I see with small business owners, startup businesses, they're so excited and they're so geared toward their passion and the operations piece of it, that I think sometimes unfortunately the HR side of the business gets overlooked. And it's and I don't mean that when I say overlook people, because of course you need people, but it's what do you do with those people, and how do you make sure that your employees have the greatest experience so that they become really productive and awesome employees for your organization. So, I love to get into small businesses when they're really starting out, and because I think there's so many things that can be done on the front end that will ensure success for a small business as they go along. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Most of you probably understand the importance of having good HR practices, but I just wanted you to keep these things in mind as we go through this today. And we're going to hit some pretty basic HR concepts, and I'm sure that it'll probably stir some questions in your mind, and we can definitely follow up, and hopefully Ginger will have some time for some Q&A. But I really want you just to start really thinking about all of the things, there's just all the things that you need to think about when you're talking about hiring that first employee. I work with some businesses who haven't even hired their first employee yet, and they're already starting to think about all these different aspects of managing employees. So why should you engage in good HR practices? Obviously, there's a ton of reasons, but I would tell you that you're not going to be successful if you don't do this. So, because first and foremost, for your business to be successful, you obviously want to make sure that you're hiring and retaining the best of the best. You want great talent in your organization, so you better put things in place that will ensure that you can do both of those things. Culture, you hear a lot, you heard this word engagement, but culture always comes to mind. And me, Ginger my bio really said 25, but it's probably closer to 30 now. I just don't like to admit that. But when I start, it's interesting over the years just seeing how much it's changed when it comes to what employees expect from their employer. And employees are looking for a total experience now. And so having a great culture for employees is going to be crucial if you want to compete and succeed. Um, Obviously we know, all of your employees have a major impact on your business, good and bad. If your great employees will make it great, but if you have bad employees, it certainly can have a major impact on the negative side. This next bullet point sounds bad, but I don't, it says because you don't know what you don't know. Unfortunately, good and bad, with HR, there's so many rules and there's so many things to keep up with. You guys aren't expected to be experts and you shouldn't be experts, but there are things from an HR perspective that you need to know. And we'll get into some of the laws and things in a little bit. Obviously, being able to establish some infrastructure and will ensure your operational efficiencies. And obviously, in the last one on here, the one that we always are concerned about, we certainly want to make sure that we're helping you minimize risk and avoiding any potential costly lawsuits down the road. So those are a lot of examples of why you want to have good HR practices in place. And so here's what we're going to kind of run through today. And again, I'm going to hit these pretty high level. And Ginger, I think I had emailed you, and we can always come back and visit more of these in detail later. And we could really do webinars on all these topics separately. So we're going to kind of hit high level today, and certainly we can get into more detail as time permits. So obviously we want to make sure we're hiring the best, keeping them safe. So we'll touch on everything, all of these, all the way down to, terminations and how to handle those effectively. So let's talk a little bit about, hiring the best. And prior to March of this year, when everyone's world changed significantly with the COVID crisis, unemployment was extremely low. It was, the major issue that I had with my clients, or major challenge that they had, was being able to find good talent and being able to retain their good talent. And unfortunately, sometimes small businesses even have more difficulty being able to compete for that top talent. And so here's some of the mistakes that we often see with small business owners when they're hiring. So whether you're new to, if you don't have any employees yet, you're thinking about hiring that first employee, I think these are some great things to keep in mind. Or maybe you've got 10 employees now, and maybe you can look at some of these and say, gosh, you know what, I did do some of these things. So, first of all, and again, a lot of the things that we do, decisions we make, sometimes are impacted by or a result of the labor market. And I saw a lot of this, over the last couple of years with the unemployment, being so low and the economy being so good. We get desperate and we hire out of desperation. And I would tell you, don't do that. I don't care if it takes you a little bit longer, make sure you're hiring that right person for your organization. And we can have a whole discussion about what hiring the right person means. And it doesn't necessarily mean just hiring the right person because they have the right skills. Most people, it's so much more than just skills. As a matter of fact, I think it's probably more, if I was gonna, I'd say 60-40 is 60% more about fit, personality, all those things, and then 40% skill. But what we oftentimes will do is we hire for skill without really thinking through the other aspects of what makes a good employee. Another thing I often see is that we hire people without having a clear job description. And what I mean by that, as a small business, you may not have written job descriptions in place, but certainly when you bring a new employee in the organization, they need to know what they're going to be doing. And I know that may sound simplistic in a way, but it's amazing to me that how many people are brought into an organization, but with really no clear definition on what they're going to be doing. And with small businesses, as you as the owner or manager, you wear a lot of hats, and we often do that with new employees coming in. But as you bring people in, making sure that they're clear on what what their role is extremely important. Improvising the hiring process. I see this happen a lot as well, where we just, again, it goes back to the desperation a little bit, but we're in a hurry. We're slammed with work. We suddenly got this new contract in. Now we got all this work to be done. And so we got to get people in fast. So we will bypass practices, or we'll make some decisions that we normally wouldn't make. Never a good idea. So stay clear of that. This next one, and this is funny. I see this happens a lot. So we hire someone that's just like us. We're the business owner. We know how to run our business. We know what we need. So we want people just like us. And I'm guilty of it. I like people just like me too. But unfortunately, I have some bad bad characteristics that so I need to hire people that will help me will pick up where I'm not. So for example, I sometimes don't like to get bogged down in details. But in my job, and a lot of jobs, details are important. So I need to hire people who like to get down into the nitty gritty of the details, because that's what's going to help you be successful. As business owners, we like to think that we know everything, that we've got all this under control, but we don't. And we all have our own strong suits and things that we're not so strong on. So make sure you're hiring a variety of people that can fill in all the areas where maybe you're not the strongest. This next one, and I will admit, in owning my own business, I was probably guilty of this at one time. But oftentimes, especially as new businesses, we're watching our dollar, obviously, very closely, and sometimes we don't hire enough people, and think about the toll that takes on everyone else. So I get the need to control costs, and obviously it's always a decision you have to make. But there's things that you should start watching out for. If work's not getting done, if employees are starting to feel overworked, or there's things to watch for, and make sure that you're paying attention to when you need to bring on that next person into your organization. Not anticipating churn. What I mean by that is, always keeping a pulse on your workforce, understanding, where your vulnerabilities are when it comes to who's a potential person that might leave your organization. I think one of the things that I'm seeing, and this is not really a discussion for today, but one of the things that I think businesses are really severely lacking is succession planning, and having people cross-trained and people ready to take over for positions in an organization. And where this has really become apparent has been over the last several months with all of the COVID and what's happened in organizations. And it's just been really interesting to see how the holes are becoming very evident in organizations where we rely so heavily on certain people within our organization. If suddenly that person is no longer in your organization, how are you going to service your clients? How are you going to take care of those clients? So it's really just making sure that you always are keeping a pulse on where potential opportunities are for someone to leave. And this last one, and we can speak about this. This could be a long conversation, but one of the things that I see a lot with new organizations or startups, smaller organizations, is misclassifying employees. And what I mean by that is, so under the Fair Labor Standards Act, there are employees are classified as exempt or non-exempt. There's also employee versus contractors. And so one of the things you want to make sure, I see a lot where people will try to bring in contractors, and that's perfectly fine. You just have to really make sure that they're actually contractors. And one of the things that we often see is they classify them as contractors when in essence they really should be employees. And then if they are employees, making sure that they're correctly classified as exempt, which means they're exempt from overtime, or non-exempt, which means they're in essence hourly and they should get paid overtime for working, over the 40 hours. So those are some mistakes that small business owners tend to make. I hope that some of those might have resonated with you, but I just keep that in mind as we go through here. I have a little quote at the top, and this is something that I have been saying to people for years. And this, I really think this is true. And if anything resonates with you on this, just remember this, is that as you are bringing people into your organization, hire them slowly and then fire them fast. And what I mean by that is take time, make sure you invest the time up front in your recruiting and those practices to make sure you're selecting the right person. But then once you have people in your organization, what I often see is that we tend to, if they're not performing, and we've done everything that we possibly can to help them be successful, if they just aren't cutting it, they're just not right for your organization, don't keep them. And I oftentimes see where what we do is the opposite. We hire fast and then we fire slow, and that's not a good recipe for success. So just hopefully you keep that in mind. Again, so more kind of on that is really take the time and effort to hire right. And hire right, again, can mean many different things. Again, it's not just hiring. If you're hiring someone to be your accountant, for example, they might have great accounting skills, but are they a good fit in your organization? There's a lot of things that go along with, can they get along with others, teamwork, all the other things that you need to kind of think about before you're making that hiring decision, not just, again, about their skills. I think small business owners, you guys especially, have a challenge with competing with a lot of other companies. And, small businesses sometimes can't maybe offer the same salaries as other businesses can, but you can get creative. The good news is, I think this day and age, employees, again, are looking for a lot more, and that can be good and bad. I think it's not anymore. It's not just about their pay and maybe their benefits. It's about the whole is what we call the total rewards package. So if you're a small business and maybe you can't pay that salary, high salary up front, what are some other things you can do? Can you get flexible schedule, a reduced work week, maybe giving them a bonus at the end of the year? There's all kinds of things that you can do to get creative in order for you to be able to retain and find the best people. Be a good manager. I know that sounds really simplistic, but it is. In all my years of experience, this is so true. People truly do leave managers. It's, the organization, sure, there's organizations that have issues, but a lot of times it comes down, the root problem is the manager or that person that the employee directly reports to. So recognize that and do what you can, to think about, do some self-evaluation. Am I a good manager? And what does it mean to be a good manager? So take the time to, just do some self-reflection. We all, again, have our strong suit, things that we do well and not so well, but really employees have a lot of needs. And I think what they really want, they want someone as a manager that they can connect to, that they know the manager cares about them. Those are half the battle if you can do those things. So just take some time, think about what it means to be a good manager. There's a million books out there, there's a million resources out there, but I think that's ultimately, at the end of the day, what people want is to feel like they're appreciated, respected, and that they have a good relationship with their boss. And the next one kind of goes and coincides with that, and it's recognizing good work. I see this so often with small business owners where we don't take enough time to make sure our employees know how much they are appreciated and recognizing the good work that they really are doing. And I know, again, this sounds maybe again a little simplistic, but these are the things that always surface when we're talking about employees and employee satisfaction. So as you're building your business, you're starting up, you're bringing employees in, create these things now, put these things in place, and you'll certainly be prepared as you grow your business. Uh, Relationships matter. I truly believe that everything that we do, it's around relationships. So people will do more for you when they feel connected, when they feel like, again, that you care. And so relationships really are at the center of everything we do. And being a good listener, again, these are all things that probably, you've probably heard 100 times, but I think it's funny, sometimes I'll run across managers who think they do well in these areas and they really don't. So this is a time to kind of really reflect on your management style, how you are. It doesn't mean you're necessarily going to change, but you certainly want to think of, how can you adapt to different people, different styles. And maybe again, it goes back to maybe you've got a great business idea, great model, but you're not really a great people person. Well, then you hire people under you that are great people. So again, just take the time and think about, I know it's these are kind of touchy-feely subjects, but again, it's critical, I think, as you think about growing your organization. So let's move into some of the little bit more nitty gritty here. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on any of these subjects. I think we have Ginger about an hour, so I won't spend a ton of time on each subject. But again, these are critical aspects from my perspective when you're thinking about keeping your business prospering. So this one is keeping employees safe. And so a couple of things that I just want everyone to think about. Of course, we all know that, yes, we want our employees to be safe, but it's important to know that there's requirements that you have to follow. So I wanted to point out a couple of things here. I won't go into a lot of detail again, but as you're thinking about your business, one of the things that you always want to be thinking about is compliance. And one of the things, you do have an obligation as a business owner. You do have a responsibility to keep your employees safe, obviously. But then above that, and your duty to keep people safe, there are some legal requirements that you have to follow. There are federal standards that, from a safety standpoint, that you have to follow. There's everybody knows OSHA. And so there are some things that you do have to follow from that perspective. Now, something that I point out, I get this question a lot, is around OSHA reporting. It depends on your industry and how many employees you have, but some industries, and if you have less than 10 employees, you do not have to, you're exempt from OSHA reporting. And that means the OSHA log, but that doesn't mean that you still aren't required to keep your employees safe. So I always like to point out that distinction so everyone understands that. And you'll notice in my presentation today, I touch on some Kentucky related things, and I guess I should have said that at the beginning of this presentation. My organization is based in Louisville, Kentucky. So I have some, I talk about Kentucky in a few of these slides, but just wherever state you're located in, just make sure that you understand what your state specific laws are when it comes to OSHA and safety regulations. Most employers, in the state of Kentucky, almost every employer has to comply with the Kentucky OSHA state plan. So make sure you understand what the laws are in your state. If you have questions about this, you're not sure, you can always reach out to me, or you can reach out to consult with your attorney, because you do want to make sure that you've got those basic safety compliance issues covered as you grow your business. There's also a great OSHA puts out if you're not familiar with it, OSHA has a small business handbook that when you look, it doesn't seem small when you look at it, but it's got a ton of information, but it's great information for a small business just to help make sure that you're thinking through everything that you have to do from a compliance standpoint in order to ensure that your employees are safe. So just you can Google that. It's a great tool for ensuring that you've got the safety things under control. All right, so let's move into my favorite subject is employment law. So I think this is probably the biggest area where I get both ton of questions, sometimes frustrations from business owners when it comes to navigating and keeping up with all of the employment laws that are out there. I use this graph, I love this this picture because it really just kind of just gives you an idea of kind of where we are. And this is even outdated, but I think it just kind of shows you. So if you look in 1900 on the very left, there's just a couple things there. And over 2011, you can see all of these employment related laws that are out there. And obviously you're not going to have to comply with all these, so don't worry, you don't have to know all these laws. But I think it's important as a small business owner is for you to understand what your requirements are and making sure that you're in compliance. I've listed a few here on the screen that I think are especially just important, and because these so what happens, and on the next slide I'll go into more detail, but employment law is the compliance with it. So as an employer, your obligation, it is typically based upon your employee size, and that's at a federal, state, and a local level. There's laws that and the laws I have listed here on this particular slide, these are all laws that are federal laws that every employer has to comply with, no matter your size. Okay. So and there's always some weird exceptions, but in general, this is, pretty much if you're an employer, these are the things that you have to comply with. So take, for example, the first one on here is the Fair Labor Standards Act. I mentioned it earlier, but that's where so many laws are driven from when it comes to minimum wage, overtime, all that comes out of the FLSA. So when you're thinking about just setting your pay ranges, or how you're going to pay your employees overtime, all of that is regulated through the Fair Labor Standards Act. So that one, even as a small employer, if you have 3 employees, you have to comply with that. The next one is IRCA, and that is the Immigration Reform and Control Act. And most people probably don't know what that is, but you probably know the term I-9 form. And as an employer, if you have 1 employee, you are required to comply with the IRCA, meaning that you have to follow the regulations. You have to have an I-9 on anyone that you employ, and there's a whole process of rules around completing an I-9, the time frames around it. So, but just know, even as a small employer, you're required to comply with that. And again, I'm not going to go through all these in detail today, but the federal tax and withholding and FICA, obviously most of you know that you have to do that. Hopefully, if you're paying employees, you've got to pay some type of payroll system in place, either whether it's an outside payroll provider, it's your accountant, your bookkeeper, someone is making sure that you're complying with those basic tax withholdings. And even with that, there's rules around making sure that you want to make sure that you've got the proper forms on file for that. Employees have signed off that on those withholdings. All those things are extremely important. And again, if you have employees, you have to comply with that. The couple other ones on here, the last one is this has to do with military. So even if you have somebody that's is in the military, there's certain rules around what you have to do, what rights that employee has under the law. So again, just having a couple employees, you still have to comply with these things. The Employee Polygraph Protection Act. And this comes in when people are hiring, and most people don't do polygraph, but occasionally I'll get a question where somebody wants to know, maybe as you guys, they're in the healthcare field, and maybe they feel like they need to make sure that they can trust that person, or they're going to be working with large sums of money. And there's very specific rules around who can have a polygraph. And so you just want to, again, knowing that you have employees, you have to make sure that you comply with this law. So on the next screen, I wanted to emphasize a couple other things. So on the first screen, the last screen, I said all of those laws, if you have 1 employee, 2 employees, you have to comply. A lot of the major federal employment laws go into effect when you have 15 employees. So once you hit that 15 mark, there's some federal laws that you need to think about, and that's the ADA, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which is as everyone knows, that's the law, the act that put in place, you can't discriminate against people based on protected classes. That's at 15 employees. And then there's the Pregnancy Discrimination Act that is at 15 as well. So I often get the question, well, does that mean that if I have less than 15 employees, I can discriminate? No, that's not what I'm saying. And I'm being a little facetious, but in essence, what that means is that if you had an employee and they felt that they were discriminated against, or you didn't hire them because they were pregnant, they can't file suit federally because they wouldn't be protected under that particular law. Doesn't mean you should do that. I mean, there's a difference between law and policy, but that's a different subject. But just know that at 15 is when you have to comply with those laws. There's some other ones from a federal perspective that go into effect at 20 employees that I always like to point out. And the first one is the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, meaning that if you have an employee that is 40 or older, 40 years of age or older, they're protected under the law. You can't fire them because they're over 40 or 40 or over. And then the other one is the COBRA laws, and that is the continuation of their benefit plans. So I don't think most of you are going to be in those buckets. I think you're smaller than that. But again, I like to point this out because as you grow your business, it's important to understand that the more laws that will go into effect as you grow your business. The next thing to keep in mind, and again, I have this Kentucky base, but something just to remember that I said that most of the federal employment laws start at 15 employees, but from there you have to look at what your state laws are. And so, for example, in the state of Kentucky, the civil rights laws, so the discrimination laws, they actually go into effect if you have 8 or more employees. So in that instance, as I mentioned before, an employee, if you discriminated against an employee in Kentucky, and you have 10 employees, they can't file a suit against you in federal court, but they certainly can go to the Kentucky courts and file a suit against you in Kentucky because you have more than 8 employees. And then also, it's important to keep in mind, then there's even local laws in a lot of localities that you have to comply with. And so, for example, in Louisville, Kentucky, in Jefferson County, the Civil Rights Act laws actually go into effect if you have 2 employees. So there again, if I have 5 employees and I'm located in Louisville, Kentucky, my employee, if I'm doing something and violating their rights, they can certainly bring suit against me at the local level, but not at the state or the federal level. So again, my point is for you just to understand and know the laws where you operate. Another example, in certain states, there's different rules for different states, but in Kentucky, there's certain rights that smokers have. And so it's just important as a business owner that you have an understanding of the different laws that operate in your state. And I think where it gets really challenging today is those laws that are more on the local level. There's so many local level laws now. You've heard of things like the ban the box, where you can't ask for, can't ask about criminal records. There's a lot of local leave laws in certain cities. So again, it's keeping up with all those laws in the different localities. Just a couple other quick things I'll mention here. If you're thinking in your organization that you want to do background checks, there's rules around how you do background checks. If you're going to do drug screening, there's rules around how you can do drug screening. Garnishments, if your employee has a garnishment and you need to take another paycheck, there's rules around how you can do that and their rights there. The other thing, again, knowing your state. Many states have rules around rest breaks, meal periods, overtime pay. For example, California doesn't do overtime pay based on federal. They have their own rules where they pay overtime on a daily basis instead of a weekly basis. So again, it's things you need to know about. This last one, payment of wages. Upon termination, if you terminate someone, every state has. I say that, I don't mean, there might be a couple that don't, but most states have rules around when an employee must receive their last paycheck if they're terminated. So again, it's just my whole point today is just making sure that I'm bringing some awareness to you and all of these things that you need to think about as you operate your business. So next thing is keeping good records. If you have employees, you need to have records. So and knowing what records you need to have and how long to keep them is important. So you want to make sure that every employee has that you have a personnel file for every employee. When you're paying hourly employees, you want to make sure that you've got some type of attendance and time records. Benefit, if you offer benefits, making sure you've got records around what you've offered, that you have offered them to them. Tax records, if somebody gets injured, making sure you have those reports. So those are just some of the key ones. And then it even gets down, so when you talk about personnel files and keeping good records, there's requirements around where you should keep them. For example, if when you do your I-9s, you get an I-9 form for someone, keep it separate from their personnel file. It should never be in their personnel file. So there's just, again, I know I'm throwing a lot of stuff out. Your heads are probably spinning, but my point again is just to reiterate, how important all these things are and all the things that you had to kind of keep up with. And I have a note on here: keep them clean. And what I mean by that, this is something that I see often, is if you're interviewing for a position, an employee comes in, or applicant comes in, and they have a resume, maybe you have them fill out an application, don't write any notes on their resume. Don't write on their application. Keep those things separately, and because anything that you have in there could be discoverable at some point if you got into some trouble later. So keep your records, but keep them neat, keep them organized. Don't put anything in there that shouldn't be in there. Know the retention requirements for all your documents. There's a whole record retention from a federal perspective. So make sure you know what those are. If you ever have an injury and somebody, let's say somebody got stuck with a needle, those OSHA records, those things have to be kept for 30 years. So it's really understanding, what the retention requirements are. I also have a rule. I-9 forms are another example. There's very specific rules around retention requirements on I-9s, but you should have a good process with that, because once you don't have to keep an I-9 anymore, get rid of it, because you want to make sure you don't want to keep anything that you don't need to keep. But it's important just to understand what those retention requirements are on all HR related documents. And if you don't have an employee handbook, you think you're too small, or maybe you just don't want to fool with that, I would recommend have some type of, I would consider having an employee handbook. It can be a very small one if you're a small employer, but I think it's something that you want to have. And it doesn't have to be, a 100-page document. But having some general information about the expectations around the policies. I think that's important, one, for your own protection, but also for the employees, so that they have the information that they need in order to work there and be a good employee. So something else to keep in mind as you're talking about hiring those employees is, this is an interesting, we could have a whole series about this, but is, how to compensate employees. But you do want to make sure that you take some time, put some thought into how you're going to pay your employees, how much you're going to pay them, what you're going to offer them as far as benefits and perks. And, at the end of the day, again, I mentioned earlier, you're a small business. You may not have the ability to pay, as much as maybe someone else pays, but that's okay. But maybe you can make that up in other ways. Maybe you can, there's benefits that you can provide, or if maybe you're not even going to provide benefits, there's a lot of perks. Maybe you offer a lot of flexibility. Again, I mentioned that. One of the most sought after benefits today, it has nothing to do with their medical, their dental, any of that. What they want is flexibility. That's and that's even become more apparent through all this COVID stuff. People want flexibility. They want more time for work-life balance. So perhaps you can come up with a way to, entice new employees and to keep your employees by offering them a total package where it's not just about, their salary. The other thing that employees want is developmental opportunities. So if there's things that you can do to provide them with some growth potential, that could be something that you can compete with. So again, it's all about being competitive, but you do want to make sure that you're compensating appropriately. If you have no idea, like, let's say you're starting out your business and you want to hire I'm just going to make something up. You want to hire a receptionist and someone who's going to greet your clients at your business, and you have no idea what to pay them. You can go out, there's some free salary information out there. Sometimes it's not as accurate, but you can do some pretty easy market analysis that aren't very expensive that can get you that information, because you do want to make sure you're at least, in the right market. So if you're hiring a receptionist and you want to pay them, $10 an hour, but the going rate in your area is, minimum 15, you're going to struggle if you're way under the mark. So it is good to kind of have a baseline understanding of what it will take to, be competitive in certain job markets. All right, so a couple other things, and then I'll try to gender open it up for some questions. But I think it's important, and I think this is one of the things that we don't do a great job sometimes with, is just making sure that as business owners, managers, that we are setting expectations, that employees, that you're communicating with your employees, that keeping them informed on what's going on with your business, where they fit into your organization, what it means to be a good performer. I think we just don't do a great job sometimes with communication when it comes to performance and expectations. And so, and oftentimes I think where we fall short is we communicate bad stuff. We tell somebody when they're doing wrong, but we don't a lot of times do it where we're not communicating enough on the good stuff. So make sure, employees want to know, even if it's bad, bad news, whatever it is, employees want to know. And if you're not open as much as you possibly can be with your employees, they're going to fill in the blanks. And a lot of times they fill in those blanks with information that's probably not accurate. So, just stop and think about, how do you communicate today with your employees? What do you have regular meetings with them? Just kind of think through how you're communicating, and and even ask them, ask your employees, do you feel like you're getting enough information? What do you need to be successful here? Have those, don't be afraid to have those conversations. And giving feedback. I still, okay, so you might have an outlier occasionally. Most people want feedback. They want to know where they stand. They value the information. People, they want to, again, they want to be appreciated. They want to hear you say good job. They want to hear you say thank you. So just, those aren't hard things to do. I think what happens though is, and I know it sounds again simplistic, but what happens is those are the things that often get overlooked. We get so caught up in running our businesses, taking care of our clients, that we don't put enough emphasis on taking care of our employees. And you've probably heard that saying that, focus 100% of your time on your employees, and you won't have to worry about your clients, because the employees will take care of those clients. And I think that's true. So again, focus on creating the right culture, for your employees. Yes, unfortunately, you're at some point in your business and working with employees, you're going to have some conflict. Not all conflict's bad, but I think you're at some point you're going to have to deal with some type of conflict. And I think that the lesson here is when you're working with employees, you want to resolve conflict quickly, and you certainly want to make sure you're being fair. And this is the number one thing that I see, again, is that most conflict it was a result of a lack of communication. And so again, I know I'm being, these are simple concepts, but I share all these things because these are exactly the same things that I see every day where businesses struggle. And every employee survey I've ever done, any time, it truly, most of the time, there was some type of lack of communication. And so the more that you can be clear in communication, the more likely that you can resolve any conflict. If you do have conflict, address it head on, because here's what happens a lot of times. People don't like conflict in general. So what do? We avoid it. And I always say it's like, pushing something under the rug, the pile just gets bigger. It doesn't go away. And eventually you're going to trip over that rug. Well, it's going to happen. So if you see something, you see that there's an issue, if you're struggling with, maybe you're frustrated with one of your employees because they're not performing like you think they should, stop and have a conversation. Be clear, make sure, excuse me, that you're on the same page. Make sure that they're clear on those expectations. Just be open and have some dialogue. If you're hearing things, there's something that doesn't seem right, or maybe you're hearing rumors about something, go to the source. Just be confident, and that you can direct those you can address those issues head on. Don't be offended by this, but as owners and executives, we often, I don't want to be mean, but oftentimes I see this happen is that sometimes as the CEO, the owner of an organization, you're not right. I know that's hard to hear, but sometimes, I think it's important to step back. I'm guilty of it. I don't like to admit it, but sometimes I don't have the answers. I'm not always right. Yes, I'm, you know your business and you know what you want to accomplish, but sometimes, you don't have all the answers. So be open-minded and be willing to hear others' perspectives. And come to a resolution. If you're having a conflict with someone, one of your employees, someone on your team, don't let it fester. Just figure out how to come to a resolution so that you can move on from it and put it behind you. So last, I want to briefly talk about, sometimes there's going to be conflict and with an employee, and it's just not going to go away. So there may be, if you haven't already, at some point in your business career, your own business, you're probably going to face, having to terminate someone. And I like to make sure that I cover this because from an HR perspective, I think this is where most organizations have a lot of vulnerability, and where I see most employment law, lawsuits come from is when an employee was terminated and it wasn't handled correctly. So I'm not going to again go through all these in detail because I'd like to see if we can have a couple minutes for questions. But I would like, I'll put this up here, and Ginger, you'll have this presentation to share. But these are some things that you want to think about, and I've got another screen as well. Whoops, let me go back. As well. But so just keep these things in mind, and a couple of them that I'll touch on is when you do face, at the end of the day, you've done everything that you could to ensure, you've coached this employee, you've given all the tools to be successful, but they just aren't, performing, just not a good fit, whatever the case is. You just want to make sure that you terminate them and leave at the most, and I know this sounds weird, but leave them with the most positive experience you possibly can. That doesn't mean you apologize and say, oh, sorry, we have to do this. You don't want to do that, but you want them to leave there with their dignity and leaving the best impression that you can, because you never know what's going to happen down the road. So you want to make sure that you're leaving that in the best possible situation that you can. But there are some things, some tips and tools here, in making sure that you're doing. And one of the biggest mistakes I see is that business owners terminate people without, excuse me, clearly making sure that the firing was justified. Oftentimes we act out of emotion and we will fire someone on the spur of the moment. Don't do that. You want to make sure that you have a well thought out plan, that it's documented, that you've done everything that you can, because again, it goes back to the employment laws. What if that person was pregnant? Doesn't mean you can't fire a pregnant employee, right? But if you do, you want to make sure that you've done everything that you can to protect yourself because of that protected class that the pregnant person is in. Here's a few more. Again, I won't go into it. I know we're at the end of our time, but here's some other things. And I don't know if any of you have ever had to be involved in a termination, but I think one of the things that you want to think about is where you conduct the termination, who's going to conduct the termination, and then how do you conduct the termination? So what are you going to say? And where I see a lot of problems with termination meetings is where the person is very uncomfortable conducting the termination, and they end up getting into a long debate about the termination and the reasoning for the termination. Don't do that. Once you've made the decision and you've got everything and you're going to communicate the termination, it should be a very short and quick conversation. So and this last one, do make arrangements for final paychecks. Again, and remember, this is where it goes back to making sure you're not violating any laws, making sure that people are returning company property. You wouldn't believe all the questions I get around, well, they didn't return their laptop. Can I hold their paycheck? There's state laws around your ability to hold somebody's paycheck. So again, it's making sure that when you're making all of these decisions in everything that you do, that you're always thinking from the compliance perspective, and making sure that you're not violating the laws. So. All right, so in summary, I know this was, like I said, high level, and we can spend more time in each of these down the road, but I wanted to at least get your mind start thinking about all of the HR components of your business. So again, kind of in summary, when you're hiring, again, be very selective when you hire, and make sure you take the time and hire the right person. Don't just grab that first person you see out on the street. Create a good first impression. Most employees leave within the first 6 months of employment. So what you do for a new employee in the very beginning can really set the groundwork for a long relationship. Focus on keeping the good ones. This is a big one. We spend way too much time worrying about our bad employees. We should be spending our time making sure we're taking care of the good ones. Again, know all the laws and make sure you've got a system in place to comply. Have great communication. Give feedback as necessary. And then if you have to terminate someone, please proceed cautiously. And this is, if a plug for HR or whoever, your attorney, this is all, whenever I would always recommend that you run a termination by someone before making that decision, because again, that's those can be costly and really hurt your business in a lot of ways. My final thought, and something to leave you with, is that I love this quote. It says, it's a lot easier to put infrastructure in right now than it will ever be again. I don't care if you are 2 people, 20 people, or 200 people, wherever you are today is never going to get easier than it is right now. And so if you're a small business with, no employees yet, think about, what kind of infrastructure you want to start building now. Or maybe you already have 10 employees. It's time to put some structure in place so that you'll be prepared as you continue to grow your business. And Ginger, I will open it back up to you. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to take any questions. I know we're almost at time. That hour flew by.
Yeah, I know we had a couple of the attendees are jumping on another call right after this. So, but I can tell you what I do want to note, because we are going to be sharing this recording, and I want to say thank you, first of all, because this was a wealth of information. And I thought you hit on some very, very important points. I know that, my original business partner and I started our company back in 2011, and gosh, navigating the waters of what we didn't know was so challenging, and even down to some of the big issues we hit were exempt, non-exempt, and contractors, and how do we define these, and there's actual regulations telling us what we can and can't do with that. Right. So it was really essential for our company. We were very small starting out. We didn't have the ability to have in-house HR, but we met those needs by outsourcing, and we tried a couple different methods of that. And I know, so I highly recommend for people that are small businesses or starting businesses, to find a good partner that you can work with that can support your HR needs. I know HR Affiliates, your organization is one of our service partners, and you are available. And I know you also have knowledge about other resources that people can use. And I hope that for all of our participants, for questions, Jennifer is one of our experts listed on our MyCare Alliance website. So if you did come up with some questions after viewing this video, please feel free to reach out to her directly through her link on the website and connect. Jennifer, I look forward to having you back and expanding on some of these topics.
I know, and it was really just a tease today with everything, but it's, there's so much, and I think that would be, I would love to do that, and we can drill down to anything. And, and if I sparked a question for somebody today, like you said, please have them reach out, because we do this for a living. This is all we do. So, and we've probably we've probably already faced these questions, before, and we can probably answer them a lot quicker than, you having to search and try to find those answers. And we're here to help. So I don't mind helping at all.